Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. Jeffrey Burke here. I'm your host and I'm so glad you're here. This is an amazing platform for me, different than the radio show. Today I get to actually do things visually with my guest. How fun is that? We were just talking about that just before we were coming on the air here, about how much more fun it is to actually be able to interact. You know, for years I talked to a microphone, or I talk to the headphones and them coming through a phone. And now I get to actually see my guests. And I just think it's so much more interactive. And I think our message is a little bit stronger and a lot more enjoyable and definitely a lot more engaging. So I hope you enjoy the show today. I have got a great one for you. My guest today is Kerry Hughes, and we're going to be talking about so many things. She is an industry icon, has been involved in so many different avenues of the industry. And I know we're going to touch on a lot of those today, but I'm telling you, this is going to be one that you're going to enjoy. Sit back and, take in all this great information and help me welcome my guest. Hey, Kerry.
Hey there. So glad to be here.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's a pleasure. Boy, your longevity in the industry is amazing. And I think it would be hard for me to ask you what your favorite part of the industry has been, because I have a feeling it's varied.
Yeah, that's a good question. Our industry encompasses a lot, right? And when you call natural products, herbs, supplements, cosmetics, foods. And I love all the things, that have to do with plants, but I also like the supplements too, right? Those are both, very important things to me, and how they intersect in kind of new understandings in medicine, especially functional medicine, is something that I've been doing deep dives in within the last, 10 years, I guess. And I really think it's changing the face of medicine, which is exciting. And we're actually coming to a place now in, dietary supplements and herbal medicine where we're really now able to explain in a better way what they actually do, in our own terms, not in pharmaceutical terms, not in food terms, but in our own terms. And I think that is a really exciting time.
And I agree with that. And I agree that the conversation is happening. And it's interesting because being around as long as I have and being in the industry as long as you have, we've seen a lot of different ways of how things are presented, how they're talked about, how they're advertised. And today it seems like social media is playing a kind of a big avenue in supplementation, and some good, some scary, not so good. But I think that people are asking questions. It seems like the younger generation today has taken kind of an admiration, if you will, for the supplement industry. And it seems like there's a fondness for our industry with a lot of the younger individuals today. And I'm kind of liking that, because we need some young blood to come into the industry, because there's a lot of us that have been around a while, and we need some new people coming in. So it's kind of nice to see that, but it's great, to your point, that the conversation's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah. I also see the kind of renewed interest in younger generations, and especially in herbal medicine, which is exciting. People want to learn again how to make things with their own hands.
Well, and everything from farming has changed. Anything from the way we look at agriculture has changed. We know that the way things are grown today are probably not grown the best way that they should. We had just talked briefly about, organic, and I was just a kid when organic launched, and I kept thinking to myself, how cool is this? I get to eat fruits and vegetables. I mean, I was raised in the country where there's no chemicals used. It was wonderful. And, here we are, 4.5 decades later, and we found out that somewhere along the line, we forgot to pay attention to the soil. And now the soil is naked and barren, and those things that we used to love to eat and to enjoy now seem almost empty of not only taste, but nutrition. So now we're starting to focus with the new category, regenerative agriculture, and we're starting to focus on starting to give kudos, if you will, and support to the soil so that the soil can actually do its job. So that's really happening now, and there's been so many changes in things like delivery systems and, the way things are presented. And I was talking to someone the other day. I said, if you would have asked me 25 years ago if I would recommend a probiotic that wasn't refrigerated, I would have said absolutely not. And now we have probiotics that are shelf stable. So the industry is still continuing to grow. I don't think we've come anywhere close to where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, to your point with the agriculture, it's kind of the same as herbal medicine. You could look at it as full circle in a way where these things aren't really new. These are old techniques, old knowledge. And, with regenerative agriculture, there are older techniques of how to do things, which, kind of follow the way that nature does things. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it that way. It's like, why did we even do it that way? And
Exactly.
being humans, the way that we are, we like to take things like to the extreme, right? And do these pendulum swings in each direction. And did we learn some interesting things along the way? Yes. We have Western medicine, and that's really essential for a lot of things now. And, it has its own place. But the old techniques have their own place too. And they have a really important place for not only healing for the planet, but also for people. And same with agriculture, and we're finding that, this is not just a consumer-led movement with the regenerative, it's actually farmers. Farmers are realizing like they don't want to do this anymore. They're tired of all the pesticides, the health of their families have been affected. It's hard to make a living, all the cost of the inputs. It just doesn't sit right with a lot of them. And turns out, in many cases, once the transition's made, it's less work for farmers. And so it's really become a farmer-led movement. And that's so exciting, and just like herbal medicine is such a consumer-supported, consumer-led in most ways, I think. We really wouldn't exist. DSHEA wouldn't have been passed if it wasn't for really, really strong consumer support. And so, I think that's always important to kind of zoom back and think about that and think about why the people are supporting it and why it's so important.
Well, and beautiful. Thank you. To your point, I agree 100%. And it is interesting that we are having such a vocal kind of passive but still very visible kind of uproar with people that is kind of festering out there, where people are like, enough. And I talk to farmers as well, and they're just like, we're tired of the chemicals. We want to start doing something a little bit better. And they're also learning that with things like regenerative agriculture, when you're not tilling and you're protecting the topsoil, that your crops grow denser and more nutrient dense, and the crops are larger. I remember I was talking with Rick Scalzo, and he said the first year that he grew his turmeric down in the farm in Costa Rica, the turmeric, he had a beautiful crop. And he grew it certified organic. The next year he grew it certified regenerative organic, and the crop was almost 5 times larger. And he said, this is just crazy. He said, we should all want to do this. And I said, yeah, we should, but there's just a lot of people that are deep rooted in what's been done for a long time. So it is a movement, and it is going to take time. I had Evan Harrison on with me, who is the CEO for Kiss the Ground. And we were talking about the soil and things like that. And he had made a statement that it was like decades for people to really grasp onto organic, to where they started thinking it was a good idea. And it's only been a couple years on regenerative, and the movement is already taking hold. So maybe the public is also ready for some changes.
Right. That's a good point. And even, organic, when it first was thought about, did actually include a lot about the soil. And that was just kind of taken out of what organic means
Exactly.
in time, and so, we're kind of back to that. And that's such an important thing. But I think also when it comes to regenerative, it's really important not just to think about the soil and think about the soil holistically, but also to think about biodiversity and the whole ecosystem and how that is all changing. Because when the environment gets better, the whole system gets better and life comes back to it. And, we are at, right now standing on like the brink of the next largest extinction, and biodiversity is really been lost. Our diet is so deplete in biodiversity. You know, something like 60 or so percent of all of our calories come from only 4 plants. And we're suffering because of it. And if you look at the loss of genetic diversity in our diets, there's a really, intersecting graph that goes the same direction or the opposite direction with the chronic disease that has really been plaguing ourselves in the Western world. And so with the loss of biodiversity, chronic diseases happen. We've gotten a lot these kind of lifestyle kind of sicknesses that are part of society now. And it's because we have lost all these medicinal compounds and the health of our food, and also the medicines that were in the food. I mean, if you think about it, people used to eat plants, right, that were soil, like they were salads or those kind of things, but they had more bitter elements to them, right? And those bitter elements are the medicinal compounds. We used to get our medicine in every meal we had, right? So this is kind of really bioavailable medicine because you're eating small amounts at a time and you can really absorb them. And also with our water was filtered naturally through rock and through soil. And so you're getting, really dilute calcium and magnesium, solubilized in each, glass of water that we would have. And that isn't, happening anymore. And now, osteoporosis is a big thing. And so our health is really suffering when you just look at the obvious facts, of what has changed. And there's, some shocking figures like with the plants, right? So like corn, right? So corn has been, part of human diet for quite a while. But if you compare the corn today, like the sweet corns that we have as the main corn that we use, to the corns of, not very long ago, just a few decades ago, there's been a complete reversal in nutrition. So it used to be something like, and I wish I had this written down in front of me, but it's something like, used to be 30% or so protein and about 2 or 3% sugar in that old corn varieties, those heirloom varieties that we used to consume. And now it's about 40% sugar and about 2% protein. So, I mean, if you look at just the staple things that we're eating, that we're getting most of our calories from, how much just not only the macronutrients have changed, but also all of those medicinal compounds that came with the plants that we used to eat, and also the water, and even livestock breeds have changed. So we've lost a lot of breeds of livestock, and the genetic diversity of our livestock has gone down quite a lot, to make them easier to industrialize.
I saw some stats the other day. It says that we have lost over 40% of our insect population and over 50% of our bird life populations due to just herbicides and genetic chemicals used on our crops. And then the same article talked about us having the topsoil on our planet for about 58 to 60 more harvests, unless we do something about the topsoil. That's frightening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was involved with the writing of the certified regenerative by AGW standard,
and thank you for that.
And in the very early times of that, it was me and Andrew Gunther, right, who was the executive director of AGW, and we were trying to figure this out, like what's this standard should look like. And I said, well, we need an indicator that's beyond. First of all, we need a comprehensive view of soil health, like not just organic matter that does not tell the story. But then let's get another indicator of how the environment's changing so we can track this, right? And I really wanted biodiversity, and he said, how about, I said, but what's a good indicator of biodiversity? And he said, how about flies on the windscreen? He's British, so he'd say windscreen. But do you remember how much, because you and I think, are around the same age, maybe, how, you used to take drives and, by the end of the drive, you could barely see through the windshield. Right?
A bug's life.
Right, exactly. And it's really striking how much less, you get on the windscreen, basically, because the insect life is just not there. anymore.
I've never
But
thought
it
about it
can
that
make
way.
a good comeback.
Yeah.
Can come
Well,
back.
I think we have to be proactive. And I think one of our biggest problems is, getting the government involved in a positive way. But we know how government does have a tendency to like to sign bills and like to put their names on things, but the follow through is ridiculous. And I think we need to do this. And I don't know whether the voices have to come from the people and the farmers, because I think if we sit back and wait for just the government to do it, it's not going to happen. I think we need to really voice our opinions. And I'm hearing strong opinions about agriculture as I travel around the country, and I go to some very rural areas where I actually get to talk to farmers. And it's amazing. And then I come from that. I come from the Midwest, from farm country. And, the last time I was visiting, I stopped by a few of those farms that are now third, fourth generations in the time we were kids. And they're talking about how they're doing everything they can to not use chemicals and to really change things. And they were the first to tell me as well that their crops are bigger when they don't use the chemicals, and they take care of the soil and the environment and the ecosystem and the microbiome of the soil, and protect their livestock, and they do everything they're supposed to. The problem is you may have 3 farms doing it right, and then the fourth one down the road spraying the chemicals.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get everybody on board. um, I was talking to a farmer a couple of months ago. He said we need to get the organic farmers to move up to regenerative, and then once they're up there, then we can come back for the Monsanto farmers. They're the last ones we'll drag up the ladder. And that's probably true. But I mean, I love the idea that something is happening. There is a movement afoot, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah, and back to the farmers point. I think that as I said before, there's reports that the farmers don't have to work as hard, and also can be more profitable too. So I mean, that's kind of a winning combination.
It's a very
Right?
winning combination.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and what's another thing that really is holding us back, I think, is this argument that will never die, and that is the whole, I call it the feed the world argument. I don't know. Have you run across those guys?
I have.
Those are those are the Monsanto kind of types, the GMO types, where they say, oh, well, we need this stuff so that, we need the green revolution to feed the world. And it's like, no, we don't. And in fact, that's been proven wrong over and over again. There are large reports that have been done by, agencies, in various parts of the world. And, it's been proved wrong, but nobody will listen. These guys won't listen because their lifestyle depends on it. Their jobs depend on it. And so this is just something that is fed, regurgitated over and over again.
And there's a lot of money involved at the top up there too.
Yes. Well, that's what I mean. Yes.
Their lifestyles. Yeah. They love living those lives, and, they're going to do what they have to do because there will be a cut in some of those areas. And, but so we have to do something. And I just don't feel that people feel, maybe they just don't feel the urgency, or they don't care.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what always got me too was, as a young ethnobotanist, when I was, in my younger years, it would just boggle my mind, like, why can't all this money being spent on crop research be spent on these heirloom, crops? Because there are a lot of heirloom varieties of crops, of even the staple crops that we have, that are amazing, that are drought tolerant, disease tolerant, can exist in parts of the world that normally, they can't be grown. And, we just, have, that's not the way things went, right? And a lot of the research and all that funding was going into GMO. And in fact, even more crazy to me was the fact that they were, the chemical companies were buying up all of the seed companies, all of these seed companies that had that genetic knowledge, that germplasm, so that they could do the GMO types work. And it's just like, no, you could do this through regular plant breeding, And so, it always boggled my mind, but it still does, because there's all these biodiversity and heirloom varieties that could have so much, potential. And, when we go just looking back, let's get away from the heirloom stuff for a minute, but look at like just ethnobotany and, herbal medicine. There are so many plants out there in, nature and biodiversity that have uses that people know how to use, that are being, getting good results for people. there's even a lot of those have even some good science already, and people have them domesticated and everything. And they're just waiting for somebody to commercialize them, and to do that right. Because when it's done right, it can really, save the world in a way. Um, it really, when rural livelihoods are supported, then those people don't have to resort anymore to bad ways of doing agriculture, to destructive things that, of course, you would do if you were in their position, because a lot of them have been taken away from traditional ways of living, taken off their land. They don't have proper access to be able to support the environment and nurture it. They're just doing shifting agriculture, whatever it is, to quickly feed the family or to get cash crops, basically. And a lot of times those are not the best ways of using the land at all. So if those rural livelihoods can be supported through market access, it's a really powerful thing. And I really feel that strongly that this is the power of our industry. This is where we came from. Why do we not see this? Why do we not talk about this? We kind of, in a passing, kind of talk about traditional medicine or traditional knowledge, but there's so much there. That's where the innovation came from, and that's where it's going to be in the future if we keep it alive. And every day that goes by where we lose more species, we're losing innovation for this industry. And it's a shame, because it's our industry that should be keeping those things alive for us, if nothing else.
Agreed. Agreed, 100%. And it's right in front of us. I mean, it's literally right in front of our face. And we just have to have more people apply themselves, show their passion, have a voice, and realize the visual part of the thing that's right in front of us, that's talking and screaming at us every single day. And yet it still is going on, with not enough focus. And it's very, very sad. And, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because there is a mentality out there when you talk about poor quality food and bio-made food and processed foods and bioengineering and GMOs. People are like, yeah, well, my diet's bad, but I take a vitamin. And I'm just like, maybe we need to just back up. Yes, supplements are but they're supplementing your diet. The diet that is supplementing is a disaster. You're right. We need to start there, and we're not giving it the focus. And I wish I had a magic wand. We could just kind of wave it and get everybody's mindset in line, but that's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, I think, I'm an undying optimist, but I think that I think that light bulb is going off now for people, with all this kind of backlash on the processed foods, the ultra processed foods. People are really starting to, at least the, major conversation out there is starting to kind of turn away from those. And I hope anyways that will, get back to like what is, a real wholesome diet and whole foods and all that kind of thing, which should be the basis, as you said. But I think even if you have a really good diet these days, those foods are just not equal anymore. Like I said, even the genetics, the biodiversity of our staple foods it's just different. Those foods are made differently, and then they're relying on soils that are depleted. So they don't have the same minerals in them. They don't have, the same nutrition, overall. And so, the best diet today, I've heard, I think it was Mark Hyman who said something like the best diet today doesn't even, equal the worst organic in like the 1950s or something like that. So I always tell people, yeah, it's still important to have supplements if you really want to live a vibrant, healthy life. And beyond that, our expectations of life have really changed. So I think our expectations of, for example, like what a 50-year-old is supposed to look like is so much different than it was just even 30 years ago. If you look at the Golden Girls, that old series.
True.
Those guys those ladies were in their 50s.
That's
and,
right.
They had gray curly hair, and so that's a different look, and a different expectation out of life than I think we had back then. And, and so I'm There's another one of the parts where I'm optimistic is, this longevity movement is, it might be ridiculous in some ways, but there's also the health span thing, which I think is really good, lengthening health span. And I think it is really healthy for us to think of and have different expectations for ourselves and really start to see health, not just as an like health being, not just an absence of symptoms, right? That's a lot of people's like idea of health.
True.
Are you healthy? I have no symptoms. I must be healthy, right?
True.
No, so that's not. I wouldn't say that like that's the best, description of health. So in functional medicine, they have something called the health meter, right? So if you look at it like an old style gauge, like on a car with it's like a semicircle, right? And the arrows pointing up and down, right? And this is the point of no symptoms on the health. And so on one side over here, this is the best health you could be in. And this is like the state of vigor, right? Which is like a scientific term. And then over here, there's death right at the very end, the other side.
Side.
Yeah, so the absence of symptoms is here. And, you could see how like, oh yeah, you start getting symptoms and you get kind of closer to that death side, right? The more and more symptoms and more disease that happens. But what about this other side that people have ignored for so long? It's really possible to feel really good, and people don't even let that into their consciousness. I think that a lot of people, they say, I don't really feel good, so I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, well, you're old. That's what you can kind of expect, right?" And it's like, no, don't take that. No, you shouldn't feel bad. And why is it you feel bad? And so it may not be something that the particular doctor you saw could help you with. It may not be even physical. It could be mental. It could be, something happening in your life that's affecting you and,
Sure.
mentally. But all of those things factor in. And the more and more health you can, get. And I do think that these days supplementation has to do with this side a lot, pretty heavily. It can help you with this other side too. But, if you want to get to that state of vigor, I think supplements are involved, and especially as we age.
And I agree. I think it's so important. And the thing about it is moving the meter to the healthier vigor, vitality side of life, if you will, sometimes it's just small changes, like a little more activity, a little bit more positive attitude, eating a little healthier, getting a little more sleep, managing your stress. I mean, these are things that are all controllable variables that if we really apply ourselves, but the effects can be monumental.
So,
but we get very comfortable sitting on our laurels, though.
Yeah. So what you're describing are behavior changes, right?
Yes.
And people don't like that.
No.
They want to take the pill. So that's where the supplements, like it's a pill. That might, fly with some people, but yeah, the behavior also needs to change. The diet needs to change likely. But, the body is really good at healing itself and getting to a higher state of health if you take away the stressors. And when I say stressors, I don't mean just the, work stress and things like that you think of, but, the other internal stressors too. And the internal stressors can be anything from, bad diet, gluten. It's all your own particular things that are a bother to your body. And we really do have different constitutions, all of us, and we react to our environments differently, right? And so, once you're able to find those things that stress your body out a little less, making those changes really goes a long way to getting your body back the power in order to move that needle. And, that's really powerful.
I was in the hospital the other day with a friend of mine, and they were in the recovery room after they had to have surgery. And of course, they have nothing but curtains there. And there's a doctor there. He was so funny. He was like a comedian. He was fantastic. And he was talking to the guy in the bed next to us who was very overweight and just had some kind of surgery. And he said, "I'm going to recommend this and this." And he said, I need you to change your diet. And my ears are perking up and I'm listening. And he goes, "And I'm going to go ahead and prescribe the exercise pill for you." And he goes, "Really? They have one?" He goes, "It does all the exercises for you." And he goes, "Would you like me to prescribe that?" He goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "No, there's no pill. You got to get up and start moving." And I died. I laughed so hard. He looked over and I said, "I'm sorry." I couldn't help it. But that is the state of things. We want a pill for everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean,
funny.
in the defense of people, which I don't know that everybody deserves of defense, but our lifestyles have become very chronically stressed in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. And the support systems that used to be there, just aren't there. And I think that's part of it. I mean, look, we were just talking about the diet and the food. Those are stressors, you know? And so this chronic stress problem, which, we've known scientifically, doctors know it for a long time, for decades. They would say, oh, well, people need to reduce their stress. It's bad for them. And we know, like, every major disease gets worse with stress, right? But you can tell people that till you're blue in the face, people are still not going to change, right? And it's a shame. I think maybe there's a little bit more waking up about this, with the yoga and the meditation and that kind of thing. And certainly people staying home during COVID, or people got really stressed, but I think there was a little bit of a break from the old lives where people could reflect a little bit about this and their state of mind,
Mm-hmm.
and our physiology is it's evolved through very, very long time for us to basically run from the bear, right? We have a really good system in us to keep in balance, where it's like, we go, oh, there's a bear, and we just like all the resources, our metabolism changes in a split second, and it makes the energy available to us, and it makes us able to do that, to get away and to be able to run from that bear, so that we can rest, digest, and repair tomorrow, right? But tomorrow is supposed to come. And for decades, tomorrow hasn't come for a lot of people, and they haven't had the time to rest, digest, and repair. And they're running from the bear all day long, and they feel like it. People know they feel like this, right? And when they feel this way, it's affecting your metabolism, right? And case in point, the one of our organs that's really kind of vulnerable to stress is the GI tract. And the GI tract it's like all this innervation, a lot of the central nervous system kind of is in there, right? And that's why we say, oh, we have a gut feeling, about something. That's actually, means something, right?
True.
And some people don't feel their guts very well, and they also don't get gut feelings, or they don't listen to them, but or they've been, they've dulled that signal. But when we are stressed, and when we're stressed constantly over a long period of time, our GI tract, our microbiome can change, because when we're running from the bear, our digestive system basically shuts down, and our motility goes away, kind of thing, and we're not digesting and resting and repairing and doing all those things, because our body is like, no, we're not spending energy on that right now. We're going to get away from the bear, right? And so a lot of people that have these GI like disturbances, they don't feel good. They have bloating, and they have, they could have, microbiome imbalance, or, really bad microbiome imbalance like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It's from long periods of probably this running from the bear, where their microbiome has changed so much that it's gone up into the small intestine even, and where there's not usually a lot of microbiome. And those guys feel really bad. And sometimes they don't even know that they feel bad in their GI tract, because they don't feel it anymore, become kind of numb. And so, I think it's really important that people start getting educated about, really how bad this stress is. Because after a long period of time, that system's going to break down. We have amazing systems in order to keep in balance, right? We have the HPA axis. So there's this kind of triangular axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and the adrenal gland. And they have all these kind of checks and balances between them, these cascades to like always keep us in balance, so that our systems are always kind of surveilling and trying to keep in balance, and like, it gets pushed one way and it goes, whoa, 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 okay, we got it. We got it. It's okay, we got it. But after decades of that, something's going to break down in that axis. Gotcha. And, we used to have an old word for it that wasn't really accurate, but it's kind of still a good word, adrenal burnout, And, I've seen people with cortisol patterns where there's no pattern. It's just flat, because they can't rise a response anymore. Their body just, and by the way, cortisol is another one of my things that I like to talk about because, it gets a bad rap. Cortisol, the stress hormone, actually it has a really important place in our lives. We're supposed to basically, when we wake up, we get a, rise of cortisol that lasts, the first couple hours of our day. And then it's supposed to just gradually kind of go down throughout the day and into night, where we kind of fall into a gentle sleep. And then it starts again in the next morning. That's a normal cortisol response. And that's why we're diurnal animals, right? And it's also like a metronome for us. It does this every day. And it sets the tone for other hormones in our body, like insulin. Cortisol and insulin have a very tight interaction. And if cortisol is off, insulin's going to be off. And insulin's a big contributor to chronic disease and aging, and the effects of aging, whatever. And so also cortisol has this metronome has something to do with our stress hormones, sex hormones. So if we're not able to produce cortisol, we're probably not able to, effectively be producing the sex hormones that we need to have a really healthy, vibrant life.
Oh my goodness, you're going to have to come back and see me again. We have so many more things to talk about. I love it. I think that it's important. I think sometimes so much of this information can be brought to people in a way that they get the aha moment very quickly, and it makes sense. The problem is a lot of it comes in dosages that tends to be not just boring, but way over our heads, overwhelming. And most people have phased it out. But when we can give people information, they could be like, okay, I get it. That makes sense. Oh, and that's me. That's me. I love doing things where people are they're like, that's me you're talking about up there. And I like that because it lets them realize, number one, they're not the only one. But number two, that they're being recognized, that it's not all in their head. This is real stuff happening. And I think that's important. God, I had so much fun with you today. Will you come back and see me again?
Of course.
I'd love to have you back. I'd love to talk about hormones and organs in the body and give people an understanding, a 101. Yeah, me too. Well, before we go, I have two questions I'd love to ask my guests. The first one is, leave everybody with a thought of the day.
Okay. You mean like a thing to do, or just something to think about?
Something from you that means something to you that you want to share with everybody.
I mean, I guess I like to get people connected to plants because I'm an ethnobotanist, right? And that seems really overwhelming to a lot of people. And so I guess my thought of the day, or my thing to do, my call to action of the day for everybody would be to just connect with one plant, learn one plant. And I think that's how you get over the whole, how do I learn plants? Because there's so many plants and I don't know anything and I can't know anything ever. I think everybody just sees, a lot of people see the world as a green carpet, right? And it's just all this green, there's no individuals. But actually, once you start connecting individually to plants and you learn, the name of something, maybe you start with lavender, right? Lavender, there's a few different kinds of lavender, but, learn one, right? And learn to be able to visually, oh, that one over there, that's lavender. I know lavender. And then challenge yourself, okay, how can I use this? Read up on that. And I'll tell you right now, lavender is kind of cool because it can be used safely and you can experiment with it in a lot of different ways. So, we all know that it smells good, right? It's kind of a popular scent. It's calming. Why not just pick some and put it in your bath? It makes a nice calming bath. You can put it in a little sachet even and make like lavender tea for your own self. You dip your own self in your lavender tea, which is your bath. And actually, in some cuisines, lavender is used in cooking. So French cuisine uses lavender. You can make, some confectionery items with lavender. It's just really awesome to have aroma in your food. Pick some, you can dry some, you can make sleep pillows with them. Don't be afraid. So, learn a few things about one plant and then you're going to be like, okay, I got that one, right? Now then move on to the next and just do one at a time. that's my call to action or my thought of the day.
I love that. Thank you. Second question. If you were to leave the planet today, what would you like to be remembered for?
I mean, I would hope that my boys, my kids would remember me for being a good mom and, giving them what they need. And then beyond that, I would hope that in my career, this is kind of a grand aspiration of mine, is to really inspire a kind of network of kind of done right, ethical farming and kind of biodiversity projects that, can make this world a better place, where we can connect, like I said, local livelihoods to markets, and if we do this in the right way, it can have a really transformative effect on our whole planet, a real healing effect, not only on our planet, but on ourselves too. And, that's really been my mission in my career, is to get people connected to biodiversity and plant uses for not only human health, but also planetary health.
I love that. I love it. I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have. I was really looking forward to the conversation today. My guest today, Kerry Hughes. I'm going to have her give you some ideas of how to get a hold of her and how to follow her in her career of social media, I'm sure. But I hope you did enjoy this today. And remember to have all your friends go to any platform where you can listen to the show, or go to my YouTube channel as well, where you can watch the interview. Remember to subscribe. Subscribing does a lot of things. What it mainly does is make things visible, so that all my amazing guests get to be seen even more. So, Kerry, how do people find you?
Well, I have a website, ethnofarm.com. That's like ethno and then farm with a PH. So you can find me through that. I have a blog, and I have videos, I have a YouTube channel, and there's a contact form if you need to reach out. And so I think that would be the easiest way.
I want to
connect with me on LinkedIn.
Oh yes, I've done that. So that's how I got to connect with you.
I'm hanging out there a lot.
I want to thank you. This was very engaging and great conversation, and I think you're just incredible at what you're doing, and I think you've made amazing strides in the industry, and you have so much more that you're going to do. And thank you for connecting with everybody today. We really appreciate having you.
Thank you.
You be well, stay healthy, and have a great holiday season.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Be well. Happy holidays, and God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.